The war had ended, leaving behind a global landscape scarred yet shimmering with a fierce, almost defiant optimism in America. Across the nation, a sense of triumph mingled with the exhilarating promise of a future defined by innovation and prosperity. Factories hummed, not with the grim cadence of wartime production, but with the hopeful rhythm of a consumer boom. Yet, beneath this vibrant veneer, a chill was beginning to spread. Whispers of a new kind of conflict, a shadowy struggle for technological dominance, snaked through the corridors of power. The Soviet Union, a former ally, was rapidly emerging as a formidable adversary, and the race for scientific supremacy suddenly became paramount, a silent, urgent drumbeat against the backdrop of burgeoning Cold War fears. Amidst the rubble and recriminations of defeated Germany, a desperate hunt was underway. American intelligence operatives, their faces grim and determined, scoured the war-torn countryside for a specific kind of prize: German scientists. Among them, one name resonated with peculiar urgency: Dr. Wernher von Braun. A figure of undeniable brilliance, his intellect had forged the V-2 rockets that had rained terror upon London, a stark testament to his genius and his moral compromise. His past was undeniably dark, stained by his complicity with the Nazi regime, yet his knowledge of rocketry was equally undeniable, a critical key to America's burgeoning space and missile aspirations. The urgency to secure him, to leverage his unparalleled expertise before the Soviets could, overshadowed almost all other considerations. This clandestine operation ignited a profound moral dilemma within the innermost circles of the U.S. government. Could a nation built on principles of freedom and justice ethically employ the very architects of its recent adversary's destructive power? The ethical quandary was stark, dividing officials into fervent camps. Voices clamored, some aghast at the notion of rehabilitating men whose hands were still metaphorically stained with the blood of millions, others arguing with chilling pragmatism that the ends justified the means. National security, they contended, transcended individual morality, especially with the looming Soviet threat. This argument, insidious in its logic, began to gain traction, slowly eroding the moral high ground. Thus, Operation Paperclip was born, shrouded in secrecy, its origins buried deep within classified documents. The initial publicly palatable justification was clear: prevent the Soviet Union from acquiring Germany's most valuable scientific minds. But the true scope, the moral quagmire it represented, remained hidden. The first arrivals were a select group, brought to American soil under false pretenses, their pasts whitewashed, their identities subtly altered. They were ghosts in the machine, their presence a silent testament to the compromises made in the name of future dominance. Among the ranks of America's brightest scientific minds was Dr. Elias Thorne, a brilliant American physicist whose family had endured the unspeakable horrors of the Holocaust. He had emerged from the war with a renewed zest for scientific discovery, eager to contribute to a world rebuilt on hope and progress. Yet, a growing unease began to gnaw at him. Whispers, faint at first, then growing louder, spoke of German scientists, not as prisoners, but as valued collaborators, being brought into the very heart of America's scientific establishment. His deep-seated moral convictions, forged in the crucible of wartime atrocities, recoiled at the thought. One crisp autumn afternoon, Dr. Thorne found himself wandering through a restricted facility, a maze of humming laboratories and hushed corridors. He was there on a minor consultation, his mind preoccupied with equations, when he turned a corner and froze. Standing before him, surrounded by a deferential group of American officials, was a man whose face was unmistakably familiar from wartime propaganda posters. It was Dr. Wernher von Braun. The shock that coursed through Thorne was visceral, a cold, hard knot of disbelief tightening in his gut. The true nature of the program, the chilling reality of the compromises being made, slammed into him with brutal force. His gaze locked with a superior officer nearby, a silent question burning in his eyes, a question that demanded answers, a confrontation brewing in the tense silence. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The unspoken question hung heavy in the air, a palpable tension between Dr. Elias Thorne and his superior. Thorne's discovery of Dr. Werner von Braun at the restricted facility ripped away the thin veil of post-war optimism, replacing it with a stark, unsettling reality. The uncomfortable alliance between American ingenuity and former Nazi expertise began to manifest in the daily grind of scientific collaboration. In the sterile, fluorescent-lit laboratories, cultural clashes were inevitable. The Germans, meticulous and hierarchical, often viewed their American counterparts as less disciplined, while the Americans, still reeling from the war, struggled to reconcile the scientific brilliance before them with the atrocities they had fought against. Underlying animosity simmered, occasionally bubbling to the surface in sharp words or frosty silences. This psychological toll weighed heavily on both sides, a constant reminder of the moral tightrope they walked. Thorne, however, could not simply walk away. The image of von Braun, the architect of destruction now working under the American flag, haunted him. His personal connection to the Holocaust victims fueled a relentless pursuit of the truth behind Operation Paperclip. He began a quiet, methodical investigation, sifting through hushed conversations, scrutinizing documents and cross-referencing information that seemed innocuous on its own, but, when pieced together, painted a disturbing picture. His attempts to expose the program, however, were met with formidable bureaucratic resistance. Doors closed, files disappeared, and subtle threats were whispered, reminding him of the precariousness of his position. The emotional burden was immense. Each new piece of evidence felt like a betrayal, not just of his nation's values, but of his family's memory. Meanwhile, von Braun, seemingly unburdened by the ethical implications, continued his work with an unwavering dedication to scientific progress. Internally, he grappled with a complex mix of ambition and a carefully constructed justification for his past. He rationalized his collaboration with the Nazis as a necessary evil, a means to an end for the advancement of rocketry. Now working for the Americans, he presented his vision for space exploration as a path to redemption, a grand endeavor that transcended earthly conflicts. Yet, beneath the veneer of scientific zeal, a shrewd opportunism pulsed, always seeking the next frontier, the next conquest of technology. As Thorne delved deeper, the geopolitical landscape shifted dramatically, providing renewed and increasingly urgent justification for Paperclip. The escalating Cold War amplified the perceived Soviet threat, transforming the program from a controversial necessity into an indispensable national imperative. Then came Sputnik. The Soviet satellite's successful launch into orbit in 1957 sent shockwaves through America, a bitter blow to national pride and a stark demonstration of Soviet technological superiority. This pivotal moment intensified pressure on the U.S. to accelerate its own space programs, further blurring the moral lines. In the face of such an existential threat, the ethical compromises of Operation Paperclip seemed to recede into the background, deemed a small price to pay for national security. Thorne, however, refused to yield. His investigation led him down an even darker path, revealing that Paperclip had not only brought in scientists like von Braun, but also individuals with far more egregious pasts, men directly implicated in horrific medical experiments and other atrocities. These were not merely rocket scientists, but architects of human suffering. As he meticulously compiled his evidence, a trusted colleague, fearing exposure and the potential ruin of their own career, betrayed Thorne. Information was leaked, documents disappeared from Thorne's hidden caches, and his life, along with his mission, was suddenly in jeopardy. Then a shocking document surfaced, a meticulously archived memo implicating high-ranking U.S. officials in covering up these deeper, more monstrous truths. The revelation isolated Thorne completely, leaving him adrift in a sea of powerful adversaries, a lone voice against a system determined to protect its secrets. He was in grave danger, yet more determined than ever. Thorne, now a renegade operating on the fringes, understood the immense peril he faced, yet the weight of the truth he carried fueled his desperate stand. He raced against time, driven by an unwavering belief in justice, to expose the full, unvarnished truth about Operation Paperclip. His career, once a source of pride and purpose, now hung by a thread, and the safety of his family felt increasingly precarious with every step he took. He knew the personal cost of this fight could be immense, but the faces of the victims, the silent accusations from history, propelled him forward. He meticulously reassembled his evidence, working in the shadows, contacting journalists and sympathetic figures he once considered colleagues, now wary of his radical stance. Then came the day. The desert air crackled with anticipation as a colossal rocket, a testament to American ambition and scientific prowess, stood poised on its launch pad. The triumphant launch of this groundbreaking American rocket, a direct and undeniable result of Operation Paperclip's efforts, was broadcast across the nation. Public celebration erupted, a wave of national pride swelling through every town and city. Flags waved, speeches lauded American ingenuity, and headlines screamed of a new era of space exploration. Yet, amidst the jubilation, Thorne stood grim-faced, his knowledge a bitter counterpoint to the widespread euphoria. He saw not just a rocket reaching for the stars, but a monument built on moral compromise and forgotten atrocities. Dr. Werner von Braun, basking in the spotlight, delivered a charismatic address, his moment of glory tinged, for Thorne, with the ghosts of his past. The world saw a hero. Thorne saw a man who had escaped accountability. Determined to shatter the illusion, Thorne sought a confrontation with a powerful figure, an official whose influence could no longer be ignored. He presented his irrefutable evidence, the meticulously compiled files, the damning testimonies, the unearthed documents that painted a stark picture of Paperclip's morally corrupt foundation. The meeting was fraught with tension, the air thick with unspoken threats and the clash of ideologies. Thorne spoke of humanity, of conscience, of the indelible stain left by such compromises. The powerful figure, initially dismissive, listened intently, his face a mask of calculated composure. Their dialogue was a tense dance around the nature of power, the complexities of morality, and the relentless demands of national interest. The official, a man accustomed to making difficult choices, found himself caught in an internal struggle, torn between his sworn duty to protect national secrets and the undeniable, horrifying truths laid bare before him. Thorne's relentless pursuit yielded a partial victory. While the full extent of the cover-up remained largely buried, some truth did come to light. The revelations, though carefully managed, led to consequences for certain individuals, forcing them from their positions, their reputations tarnished. It was not the wholesale reckoning Thorne had envisioned, but it was a crack in the edifice of secrecy, a testament to the enduring power of ethical vigilance. The long-term impact of Operation Paperclip on American science and ethics became a quiet, persistent debate among academics and historians. Von Braun's legacy, once celebrated without question, grew increasingly complex. Was he a groundbreaking scientist whose vision propelled humanity to the stars, or an unrepentant opportunist whose moral flexibility enabled unimaginable suffering? The question lingered, an uncomfortable truth woven into the fabric of technological progress. Years later, Thorne stood on a quiet beach, watching a distant space launch arc across the twilight sky. The fiery ascent, a familiar spectacle by then, still stirred something within him, a mix of awe and melancholy. He reflected on the compromises made, the ethical boundaries blurred, the human cost of reaching for the heavens. The rockets had indeed reached for the stars, yet Thorne knew that the shadows of the past, the moral ambiguities of how they got there, continued to linger, a permanent and subtle stain on the otherwise brilliant tapestry of human achievement. The price of progress, he realized, was often measured not just in resources, but in the quiet erosion of the soul.